You are listening to the weekly podcast from Legacy Christian Church. Changed lives, changing the world. For more information, please visit us on the web at www.lvlegacy.org.
Morning again for the 600th time. Actually, only two for me, right? Listen, a lot of times I post things on Facebook, either on Saturday night or Sunday morning, just saying, hey, we're having a discussion or we're going to discuss something. And you know, from a church perspective, you know, a lot of you are used to someone just coming up here and giving the sermon or the teaching and so on. But for us as a family, what we really like to do is after the service, we encourage people to hang out, drink the coffee, you know, interact with each other and discuss what they've heard, okay? And then also get plugged into a One Love group, you know, and we discuss the sermon openly there too. So if you're in a One Love group, discussion happens about what we talk about on Sunday. We put flesh to it to live it out. So I just want to plug that real quick because I think discussion is important with respect to what we learn and how we apply it, and you know, and how it applies to our lives. Don't you agree? All right, cool. So let's just jump right into this. We're going to get right into the epic love story. If you don't have a Bible, go ahead and grab one. We have Bibles in the seats. If you don't have your own Bible, take one of these home with you. Make it your own. Doodle in it, draw in it, write in it. But most importantly, do what? Read it. And we tell people to start in one of the Gospels where Jesus is. You know, and we're in Mark now, so it makes sense to start in Mark. But Luke is also a good one to start in, okay? So we're going to page 706 in those Bibles. And if you're going to your own Bible, we're going to Mark 9, verse 14 through 29. Let me just say as you go there, today we continue our journey through the book of Mark. And we're kind of still in chapter 9. Last week we talked a little bit about the transfiguration and what that meant for us and how it means change in our lives, right? And so we come now upon the scene which kind of is like the last exorcism, so to speak, in the Gospel of Mark. And it happens just as Jesus and the three disciples are coming down off the mountain from the transfiguration, and they're returning from that mountain experience, so to speak, and we come upon this scene, okay? So let's read this together. When they came to the other disciples, the other 9 that were still behind, okay, they saw a large crowd around them and teachers of the law arguing with them. As soon as all the people saw Jesus, they were overwhelmed with wonder and they ran to greet him. "What are you arguing with them about?" he asked. A man in the crowd answered, "Teacher, I brought you my son who is possessed by a spirit that has robbed him of speech. Whenever it seizes him, it throws him to the ground. He foams at the mouth, gnashes his teeth, and becomes rigid. I asked your disciples to drive out the spirit, but they could not." "You unbelieving generation," Jesus replied, "how long shall I stay with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring the boy to me." So they brought him. When the spirit saw Jesus, it immediately threw the boy into a convulsion. He fell to the ground and rolled around, foaming at the mouth. Jesus asked the boy's father, "How long has he been like this?" "From childhood," he answered. "It has often thrown him into fire or water to kill him, but if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us." "If you can," Jesus said. "Everything is possible for one who believes." Everything is possible for one who believes. That's our key sentence today, by the way, people. Immediately, the boy's father exclaimed, "I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief." When Jesus saw that a crowd was running to the scene, he rebuked the impure spirit. "You deaf and mute spirit," he said, "I command you, come out of him and never enter him again." The spirit shrieked, convulsed him violently, and came out. The boy looked so much like a corpse that many said, "He's dead." But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him to his feet, and he stood up. After Jesus had gone indoors, the disciples asked him privately, "Why couldn't we drive it out?" He replied, "This kind can come out only by prayer." Pretty wild passage, huh? A lot happening in there. This is the last story that we see in the book of Mark that deals with casting out of demons. We see it in several instances before that, or like I said earlier, what many call exorcism. This particular story is also in the book of Matthew. It's also in Luke. But this description in Mark is the most descriptive of these accounts. And as I mentioned before, it occurs just as James and John and Peter and Jesus are coming down off of the mountain after the transfiguration, which we talked about last week. And if you missed it, you can go to the website or you can go to iTunes and subscribe and listen to the sermons there. We have our sermons from the beginning when we were still in Rascals that are on iTunes. Anyway, we see that the other 9 disciples are in a heated debate, right, with the teachers of the law. And they're the religious leaders of that day. And they were following Jesus all over the place, trying to catch him in some sort of thing where they could prove that he was a false prophet and that kind of thing. And so the other thing that was interesting was it probably didn't help Jesus at all either when as soon as they saw him, the crowd turned and ran to him, right? Because so there's this jealousy type, envy type thing too going on, a power struggle, so to speak. But wherever Jesus went, people stirred and flocked to him. They just ran to him. And this was just another thing that probably aggravated the religious leaders. And we're not sure what they were arguing about per se, but in the middle of that group comes this man, right? And he says, my son is possessed. He brought the son to the disciples, the other 9 that were there, to have them heal him. Now we see earlier in Mark 6 that the disciples were commissioned to go and heal people, weren't they? They went out and they cast out demons, they healed people, they did wild and crazy things out there. But in this instance, they were unable to do that for some reason or another. And the symptoms, as you read these, it almost sounds like epilepsy. Anybody ever seen an epilepsy fit before? I've seen an epileptic fit, and it does sound a lot like it, okay? And it describes it very well. But later on, we see that the demon, when it saw him, it actually took him from a calm state and then put him into a convulsion again, right? And sent him into this kind of wild fit. So we're not really sure what the condition was, but it certainly looks like a possession, and a demonic possession of sorts. Regardless of that, it appears that Jesus is disappointed in the disciples, isn't he? He says to them, he calls them out, you unbelieving generation. He's not saying that to the people. He's saying that to the disciples, the 9 that were there. And he calls them out because of what do you think? What do you think it is? The what? Oh, it doesn't matter what Scott's saying. I mean, I'll listen to him. It doesn't matter. You can answer those, Scott, if you want. Faith, okay? Lack of faith, right? Okay? And it appears to frustrate Jesus because he's weary of their unwillingness, right, to get it. They just, he's been with them probably now for a year or so, right? We're not sure. By the time we get to 9 or 10, we're thinking about a year and a half, right? But then we see the compassionate side of Jesus again, don't we? The splagna come out, right? This compassionate side of him. And he goes to the man and he inquires of the son. Give me the history of this guy. Tell me what's going on. And he wants to know how long he's been like this. And the father gives him all the information, and the spirit has tried to kill him over and over again. And then we see this exchange between the man and Jesus. Okay? And so let's read this together again. The man says, but if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us. And Jesus is like, if you can? Like, if you can? Said Jesus, everything is possible for one who believes. Immediately the boy's father exclaimed, I do believe, but help me overcome my unbelief. Help me overcome my unbelief. We notice that Jesus immediately jumps on the father's statement, and specifically the word if, doesn't he? Like, Jesus clearly points out to the man, it's not whether or not I have the power or Jesus has the power to heal the boy, but whether the father had the faith that Jesus could heal him. Isn't that the way it's phrased, right? Did you have the faith to believe that I can heal him? The statement is, everything is possible who believes, for one who believes. That's the statement Jesus gives them. If we take a close look at Mark's gospel overall, there's an emphasis on faith in healing, isn't there? As we've gone through it the last few weeks. When Jesus asked someone to be healed, he asked them, do you want to be healed? Or do you have the faith to be healed? Or it takes faith to be healed, that kind of thing. Jesus' statement is really a promise here, okay? This statement of everything is possible for one who believes. It's kind of a promise. And it draws out a statement, doesn't it, from the man. I do believe. But then he says, but the interesting thing here is he says this, what? Help me with my unbelief. So it seems to contradict itself, doesn't it? But it's this kind of beautiful display of honesty, doesn't it? He's honest about it. He's like, hey, I believe, but help me with my unbelief. He on one hand declares that he believes, and yet on another hand he acknowledges that he himself has unbelief. These two statements, like I said, they appear to contradict each other, but if we're honest here, right, and hopefully all of us will be, there's none of us in this room here that haven't experienced that, right? Where you say, I believe, but, so everybody's been there, right? If you don't raise your hand, you're a bunch of... Okay. I don't want to say it. So we agree with that, don't we? We agree with it, right? So as the story concludes then, the boy is healed, and so he's so overcome by the event that he appears to be dead. Some think he's dead. But Jesus, in his typical resurrection fashion, what does he do? He goes by and grabs him by the hand and picks him up, okay, and raises him from the dead, metaphorically speaking, doesn't he? Something to note with Jesus, okay, and the epic love story, and with people whose lives are changed by Jesus, okay? When we're dethroning Satan and he's being defeated, there's always a reversal or a defeating of death, isn't there? And there's always a pointing and an affirmation of life. Wouldn't you agree? Okay, for us, that's why our mission statement is change lives, changing the world. The idea being that people are being raised from the dead, brought to new life, and changing the world, okay? And then going out and doing the same thing, raising people from the dead, okay, with the power of Jesus. Not on their own, right? Okay. So, the final closing question to this story, though, answers the question as to why the disciples were not able to heal this guy, right? And powerless to act on his behalf. I mean, in chapter 6, we saw that they were able, like I said, they were able to go out and cast out evil spirits and cast out many demons before this incident. Why did they fail this time? Why did they fail this time? We see in verse 29 what Jesus says, right? This one can only come out by what? Prayer. Prayer. Was it the Father's lack of belief, or was it a combination of the Father's lack of belief and the disciples' lack of prayer that prevented him from being healed? Okay? Or was it the disciples who now felt like they didn't need help from God? They can do this on their own. I don't need to pray. I don't need to be close to the Father. I don't need to be supported and lifted up by prayer and depend on God. We can do this ourselves. We got it, right? Anybody been there? I can do this without God. I can do this on my own, right? So we don't pray, we don't read, we don't do the things we're supposed to do, and we're powerless, aren't we? Powerless to defend ourselves. Simply put, their failure showed their lack of prayer and their lack of intimacy and closeness to the Father. So this leads me really to what this particular passage means for us as a family. I think it's really important. You've been coming in here any time now, and if you're new, we've been really pushing for the last year about two things. And one of the two things is we want to become a better praying church, and we want to become a better disciple-making church, okay? So I want to dissect a few sections of this passage for us as a family about what we should be looking at. But when we're looking at this, I want to look through the lens, okay, of that statement. And I want to look at through the lens of Jesus' statement. Everything is possible for one who believes. Everything is possible for one who believes. Sound good? Okay. So let's just look at that statement for a second. Does that statement at all say that all or everything is certain or will be? Yell it out. No, it doesn't, does it? Okay? So, but what it does say, that it's possible. Okay? It's possible for one who believes. For example, I can pray that God, will drop 14 bars of gold on my step tomorrow. Okay? But if it's not aligned with God's will in my life, and what I mean by God's will is His purpose, His plan, something that will glorify Him, okay, and give Him glory, something that may be good for me, not good for me, but eventually will give Him glory. Okay, that's God's purpose and God's plan. Okay, God's will, so to speak. Okay, for those that may be not familiar with that phrase. But when we're seeking and we're after God's will, okay, those things may or may not happen. I may pray that, right? But it doesn't mean that 14 bars of gold are going to show up in my step tomorrow, does it? Okay? So this is where people struggle the most, I think, with this kind of thing, meaning understanding and knowing God's will and purpose in their life. Because it's kind of an obscure thing, isn't it? To a certain degree. There's just certain things we don't know. And are you okay with not knowing? Yell it out. Are you okay with not knowing? No. No? Yes. I am. I'm okay with not knowing. God is God, right? I'm this human finite being. I don't think I'm supposed to know everything anyway. Right? Imagine if we did. Man, we would be living life a lot differently, wouldn't we? Okay, so the one thing I have been praying, though, lately is this simple prayer. And I've been telling some other people to do the same thing. I've been praying, God, put me at the center of your will in my life. It's a simple, small prayer, right? Put me at the center of your will in my life. You know, and the prayer is that hopefully it's a simple little prayer, but if we're at the center of his will, then hopefully our prayers, our thinking, our agendas, then in some form or way will align with his, won't it? That's the hope in the prayer, okay? But we're still not going to know some things, right? And it creates doubt, doesn't it? Doesn't it? Yeah. The bottom line is all things are possible. All things are possible. But does that mean that they will be? Okay? Especially if it's a request that doesn't align with God's will. It's not going to be. But even if it aligns with God's will, it may not happen in your time. It may not happen in your timing. It may not happen in your little microwave world where you want it instantly, okay? Because that's the culture we live in, right? I want it and I want it now. Okay, let me use my current medical situation as an example. For those of you who are new or not familiar, last year I was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, lung and brain, okay? And there are many that I know that are in here that have prayed for me, okay? And prayed for complete healing and believe that I've been completely healed, okay? They believe that with all of their heart, okay? And they've prayed that, and I quite honestly walk in faith believing that too, okay? I walk in the understanding that I am healed, okay? Now, does that mean that I will be healed forever? Does it mean that I'll be healed for a short time, long time, tomorrow, whatever? I don't know. And I'm okay with that, okay? If God's will is that I survive for a while, then he takes me home, awesome. If it's God's will that he takes me whenever his will is, or the sickness of this world, this fallen world state takes me out, awesome. Okay? It's his will. And we have to have enough faith to believe that and to trust in God's will regardless of what happens. Okay? But when someone prays over me and said, hey, I've prayed that God has completely healed you, I'm going to believe that. I'm going to walk away in faith and say, I believe that. Until God shows me something differently. And it's been a pretty miraculous year, hasn't it? For those of you that have been around. So I don't know what God's got going on. I'm just kind of riding the wave and saying, God, I'm going to ride along with you and sharing the glory with you. And those that have been praying, keep praying. Okay? But does that mean that those prayers, and if something happens crazy, that those prayers were not heard or not answered? No, not really. Okay? If we're aligned with God's will, then the answer will be revealed to us as a family, to our church family, to our family, to those outside that are looking in from the outside in, okay? And, those that have been praying and charging the hill with me. But he will reveal it in his time and in his place and not ours. Do you agree with that? Okay. This is why I don't try to attempt to explain to people and folks why some are healed and some are not. Or that I'm not going to try and explain to someone why good things happen to bad people and bad things happen to good people. All those questions that we kind of have that are the tough questions, the hard questions. All I know, and I know that I know that I know, is that I trust that good will come from whatever God allows to happen. Okay? The good and the bad, in some form or fashion, will always result in his glory. Somehow. So let's talk about faith for a wee bit, okay? Let me introduce this section with a clip from the wonderful, enduring Hollywood classic, Kung Fu Panda. I totally apologize for the quality of this clip.
What was and what will be. There's a saying. Yesterday is history. Tomorrow is a mystery. But today is a gift. That is why it is called the present.
Master! I have, it's very bad news.
Shifu. There is just news. There is no good or bad.
Master, your vision was right. Tai Lung has broken out of prison. He's on his way.
That is bad news. If you do not believe that the Dragon Warrior can stop him.
The panda? Master, that panda is not the Dragon Warrior. He wasn't even meant to be here. It was an accident.
There are no accidents.
Yes, I know. You've said that already. Twice.
Well, that was no accident either.
Thrice.
My old friend, the panda will never fulfill his destiny, nor you yours, until you let go of the illusion of control.
Illusion?
Yes. Look at this tree, Shifu. I cannot make it blossom when it suits me, nor make it bear fruit before its time.
But there are things we can control. I can control when the fruit will fall. And I can control where to plant the seed. That is no illusion, Master.
Ah, yes. But no matter what you do, that seed will grow to be a peach tree. You may wish for an apple or an orange, but you will get a peach.
But a peach cannot defeat Tai Lung.
Maybe it can, if you are willing to guide it, to nurture it, to believe in it.
But how? How? I need your help, Master.
No, you just need to believe. Promise me, Shifu. Promise me you will believe.
I will try.
Good. My time has come. You must continue your journey without me.
What are you... What? Master! You can't leave me!
You must believe.
Master!
It's not often you get to compare Jesus to a kung fu turtle, huh? But the similarities are really good, aren't they? He leaves us with commands, right? He leaves us with the idea to believe, right? I really, God speaks to me in odd ways. The other night I was in one of those sleepless modes. It happens with this illness, and when I'm in chemo mode or whatever, and I'm flipping through the channels, and this movie was on. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll check it out. And so I'm sitting here, and this scene comes on. I'm like, wow, God, thanks. I could use this in my sermon in 2 weeks. Thanks, man. Go figure, right? Anyway, I thought it fit here because, number one, we as humans, we have the illusion that we have control, don't we? Don't we? I'll tell you one thing I learned a year ago. I have no control. This is not my church. This is God's church. You are God's family. And He's in control and not me, okay? Second thing was, and the other cool thing is that it contains the theme of just believe, right? But it also, along the way, expresses that hopeful doubt in little Sifu, right, that many of us have, right? That little bit of doubt from the little Kung Fu master when he says, well, I'll try to believe, right? And I think it mirrors the man's request in Mark 9 where he says, Lord, help me with my unbelief. Help me with my unbelief. Listen, folks, this is a little prayer, too, that I think is a good little prayer. And maybe we should just pray it daily if we need it. And if we're honest, we just do sometimes. We just don't know. Sometimes we're afraid to admit we don't know. We're uncomfortable with not knowing. But I think the prayer, a simple little prayer, should be just, Lord, help me with my unbelief. Help me to believe. As believers, we should have a solid faith and belief. The Kung Fu turtle is just believe, and he disappears. Jesus kind of did the same thing, didn't he? He resurrected. 40 days later, he disappears. Go and make disciples of all the earth. Just believe. It's going to happen. These things happen, though, with prayer. If we're praying consistently. And we have a solid belief and faith with prayer, which apparently the disciples didn't, and they abandoned. Then, and if we're in prayer, then we may gain a simple understanding of God's specific will in our lives and not ours, and not our agenda. It's our belief, or faith, however, that helps us to sometimes find answers, doesn't it, to the good and the bad. Doesn't mean we will. This is why Romans 8:28 is such a powerful passage in my life. Because, if you believe all things work together for good, it's kind of freeing and liberating, isn't it? Because all things work together for good, the good and the bad. And we can trust God in those no matter what. And then we know that somehow, someday, some way, God is going to make good of it, no matter how much it stinks as we're going through it. The epic love story, or the scriptures that we call the scriptures the epic love story, tell us that faith is the evidence of things we cannot see. Right? So if you can't see something and we're having faith in it, it causes us to doubt sometimes, doesn't it? We just don't know why. But all we need to do is believe that somehow God is in the mix and ultimately His glory will be. It's as simple as that. Is it simple to live out? No. The question many of us have, though, is how do we increase our faith? How do we increase our faith? Well, prayer is the key, right? We see that, right? Jesus tells the disciples, you got to do this with prayer. So if we believe that all things are possible, then Jesus tells us that belief or faith is necessary, but He also tells us that prayer is essential. The other thing that's so very important is reading the epic love story and learning the historical and contextual context of the story so that we can pray about it and apply it to our lives and discuss it as a family together, okay, in small group or after church or whenever we get together, and just figure out how to apply these scriptures and this love story to our lives. Let me give you a quick history lesson from the scriptures that's just kind of a snapshot of what you can do in increasing your faith just through the Word, through the scriptures, okay, to help reinforce you and show you how to understand the epic love story and how it can increase your faith. Down with that? All right. Listen, what many believers and followers of Jesus fail to realize is what happens to us when we become believers. Okay? Romans 8:11 tells us, and I talk about this a lot up here, is that when we become followers of Jesus, when we become believers, the Spirit of the living God does what? It inhabits us. It enters us. Okay? It takes up residence in us. The same Spirit that rose Jesus from the dead is the same Spirit that resides in you, is what Romans 8:11 says. Let that sink in for a second, okay? By virtue of our belief and the following of Jesus, we immediately have a positional power, don't we? That I don't think many of us grasp. And we certainly don't tap into it enough, do we? Do we? Okay? Let me explain this to you in kind of historical terms, okay? Back in the day when this whole story began, okay, Moses led the people out of Israel, and then he set up a tent. God told him to set up a tent, and inside that tent was a place called the Holy of Holies, okay? And this is where God was said to be present. God Himself said, I will be present there. You can come hang out with me and be there, okay? So Moses would go and be in the presence of God. The Ark of the Covenant was kept there. The articles of the Ten Commandments and eventually other documents were kept there, okay, as the temples grew and kept being built, destroyed, and built and destroyed, okay? So after Moses, the tribe of Levi, which is the tribe of priests, those guys were designated to be the high priest of Israel and the Hebrew nation, and only those people were allowed in the Holy of Holies, okay, which is where God's presence was. Then, we jump ahead thousands of years. Jesus dies. What happens when Jesus dies? The earth shakes. There's an earthquake, okay? The temple, which is in Jerusalem then, splits in two. The curtain that enters the Holy of Holies is torn in two, and one side is left open, symbolically giving access to everyone. When Jesus died on the cross, the metaphorical, symbolical significance of that curtain tearing was that now everybody had access. Jew, Gentile, black, white, green, purple, alien, whatever you want to put in there, okay? Okay? Not that I believe in aliens, okay? But the zombie apocalypse happened that day too. People came up out of their graves, so maybe the zombies were allowed in there too. I don't know, okay? For those of you that like zombies. But, Jesus died, and then the Holy of Holies became accessible to everyone. I mean, think about that for a second, okay? then what happens is then people who are believers and followers of Jesus then are designated by Peter. Peter being one of the disciples, he later writes a book. He writes 2 books, 1st and 2nd Peter, because Peter was a simple guy. He was a fisherman. So he just said, I'll just keep this simple and write 1 Peter and 2 Peter. But in 1 Peter, he says this in chapter 2, verse 9 and 10. But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood. Okay? We have access, don't we? A royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of Him who called you out of darkness into His wonderful light. Once you were not a people, but now you are a people of God. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. So now by the virtue of the fact that you who are now part of the royal priesthood, note the positional authority again, okay? You now have been given access. You've been given total access to the Father in His throne room, in His presence, in the Holy of Holies. In the book of Hebrews, it specifically talks about this. The book of Hebrews was written to Jewish and Hebrew believers of the day, and of course it's been written to us today to study. But the writers tell us this in Hebrews 4:14 through 16. It says this, Therefore, since we have a great high priest who has ascended into heaven, Jesus the Son of God. Okay, Jesus being the high priest, okay? Let us hold firmly to the faith we profess. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet he did not sin. So they're speaking there of Jesus being the high priest, but he was here on earth. He suffered and did the things that we do. He went through all the things we did. He's been tempted like we have, and then he died on the cross, and he did not sin. He was an unblemished lamb, okay? So because of that, it says, let us approach God's throne of grace with what? With confidence, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in time of need. Do you understand the implication of that? And the importance of that? I mean, just let that sink in for a moment. We can approach God's throne with what? Confidence. Some versions say boldly. Come to the throne boldly. And if we do so, when we get there, we can receive mercy and grace to help us in our time of need. Man, just ponder that for a second. Think about it from the historical context, from when I talked about the Holy of Holies, right? Up through Jesus, then giving us access, and now we can just enter. You know? That's pretty astounding, don't you think? And it's positional authority that even the disciples of Jesus' day didn't have. Okay? Think about that for a second. We as the disciples of this day have been granted an authority and a power that they didn't even possess. Okay? I mean, they didn't have the Holy Spirit yet, did they? When Jesus was around and discipling them. Okay? Not only do we have that, it resides in us. It wasn't just falling upon them, it resides in us, okay? Now, they weren't a royal priesthood, were they? Okay? And yet we are called out as members of that priesthood. And they didn't have access to the Holy of Holies as we do. And I'm talking about specifically, this is before Jesus' death and His resurrection. Afterwards, the Holy Spirit came, filled them, and then they were in that category. But prior to that, they were out casting out demons. They were healing the sick. They were doing the things that they were doing, right? So some of the questions I think we have to ask ourselves is this. Do you think that we possess an unbelief or lack of faith in this power? Or maybe we don't believe in our positional authority clearly enough. What do you think? I think so. I don't think we clearly understand it and grasp it. If that's the case, then that lack of belief and faith and our lack of prayer, is that holding us back? Is that holding us back from unleashing God's power and God's crazy love in Legacy, in the Valley, and beyond? Probably. Maybe. I don't know. But I'm certainly thinking it's something that we should think about and pray about, right? And the other small truth is this. We've seen positional authority abused, haven't we? And it freaks us out, right, to a certain degree. We've seen these wacky healings and people doing stuff and, rattlesnakes biting people and things like that. Okay? So we tend to stay clear of that because we don't want to be associated with that kind of thing, do we? But the fact of the matter is, if God's will and purpose in our lives is to be part of something that is crazy and wild and miraculous, then, man, we better be praying for it. And we better start believing that we can be part of that. You know what I'm saying? Are we missing out on a huge blessing of being involved in something wild and crazy because of our unbelief and our lack of faith? I think so. I really do. You know, I think these are some serious questions to ponder. And our prayer should be, and we should seriously ponder and come to a conclusion that I've come to, we need to pray that Jesus will help us with our unbelief so we can start living like He wants us to, in that positional power, in that positional authority that He's so clearly given us, right? I mean, if you look at the Scriptures and you read this, it's as clear as anything, right? It's not, I mean, through His grace and mercy, He's given us that access. It's amazing to me. Listen, Jesus said clearly, everything is what? Possible. Everything is possible for one who believes. So I think the question, no, the answer I think that we should leave here with today is not, can God do the impossible? Okay? But can God and will He do the impossible if we believe? Yeah, I believe He can. I believe He can. And I pray that you leave here too believing that, or at least thinking about it, or at least pondering it, and then go be unleashed, you know? Let's pray. Lord, I pray that this starts a lively discussion, like a lively discussion about faith, unbelief, doubt, your power, our power that you've given us through your positional authority that you've given us and granted us, the access you've given us to the throne room. So, Lord, I pray that we take that seriously and that we would just enter the throne room boldly and with confidence. You know, many times, Father, I walk in there and I bow down, but sometimes I just crawl up in your lap. And I pray to Papa. I pray to Dad, to my Father, my true Father. And I ask for the grace and the mercy that only you can provide, the healing that only you can give, the power that only you can provide. So I pray, Father, that each person in this room would kind of look at that and say, you know, I can enter there. I can crawl up into my Dad's lap and let him know what I'm feeling and share my heart and my desires and seek your will and understanding of that will. So I pray, Father, as people leave here today, they're thinking that through and they're really pondering it, and that you would just sear in their heart where they stand with you, their positional authority, potential power that they can unleash through prayer and understanding. I'm looking forward to seeing some amazing things happen through these people because of your power. And it would be you and only you that would get the glory for that, Father. So, I don't know, I'm just I'm excited and hopeful for this group of people, that they would be blessed in ways that they would never envision, even in their wildest dreams. So just help them with their unbelief, Father, and put them at the center of your will. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
We are your legacy.
Thanks for listening to the weekly podcast from Legacy Christian Church. Legacy meets weekly at 5925 Tillman Street, Suite 800 in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Stay tuned for the weekly update.
Faith that unites us. Love leads the way.
Hey, what is up, Legacy peeps? This is Mike, the Creative Arts Guy, here with your weekly update. Check it out. Tuesday, August 6th, 5 p.m., National Night Out. It's an event to raise awareness in the community and develop some partnerships between the local emergency dispatch people, the firefighters, the police, and the community. It's going to be at Lone Lane Park. It is at 5 p.m. It runs till 8:30 p.m., and we're going to be doing some fun and games there. So if you want to come connect with the Upper Macungie Township peeps, or if you want to serve and volunteer at the event, please let us know. You can email events@lvlegacy.org. Other things coming up in August, we got movie night, our last movie night of the summer with Upper Macungie Township. This is going to be at Briningsville Park off Shantz Road. The movie is going to be The Pirates. The movie begins at sunset, and it is free. And once again, we are doing all the fun and games prior to the movie. So if you want to be a part of that team, email events@lvlegacy.org. Otherwise, we'll look forward to seeing you there at the movie. Other things that are going on, we have Kids Camp later in August, the 21st through the 23rd, 9 a.m. to noon. Fun and games there. We're still looking for volunteers as well as kids to sign up. So if you want to get more information, you can email Nicole, Nicole, at lvlegacy.org, or you can stop by the Live Love area next time you're in the church. One last thing, we're doing a backpack drive in August to help raise educational supplies for kids in need. If you would like to maybe pick up backpack, lunchbox, some other cool things, we have a sign-up sheet at the Live Love board. We also have a list of items that we need. So thanks for spending your Sunday with us, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.
We are